Meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. My church, prior to St. Bart's, is in Alexandria, Virginia. And over the 80 years that it has been at its current location, the surrounding neighborhoods have changed quite a bit. So today it sits right between an immigrant working class neighborhood and a middle class neighborhood. So if you stand in front of the church and look to the left, you see one neighborhood with one name, and if you look to the right, you see another neighborhood with another name. This church is a blessing to both neighborhoods because, not just because it's a church, of course, but it's a vehicle of grace for the whole area. You may recall last Sunday, I used this phrase by Evelyn Underhill, vehicle of grace. And it means to use your life, your words, and your acts as a doorway to see the world in a new way. So at this church, not just parishioners, but neighbors help neighbors through the church's dry food pantry. They donate supplies, they bake bread, they volunteer their time. It's a grace-filled connection point where people can give of themselves so that others can have what they need. And like many churches, there's no dedicated place to stage a food pantry, so they just put it in the lobby of the church offices. So to get in to the offices, you have to navigate through the boxes of diapers given by the Girl Scouts and the day-old bagels from Panera and lots of smelly soap. So some think that it's messy and ugly, and others think that it's a sign of a truly beautiful church who cares for others. But in the midst of all this generosity, there is a sign. It's printed, and I walked past it every day as I entered the building. And it's on the wall as a constant reminder to the food pantry volunteers. And it reminded me daily of who I am to be. And it says, it's not your job to judge if someone is deserving. Your job is to serve them, period. But when you're the steward of limited resources, this can be hard, right? When I worked at the pantry, I overheard some less than grace-filled comments like, there she goes, double dipping again, or how can they come get food and drive that expensive car? I don't know. Do we need to know? That's not where we're called to put our energy. The sign could have read, you are not God, with an asterisk, right? That says, you are a vehicle for God's grace regardless of the conditions. And I believe that grace can be just simple kindness, a kindness that trusts in God and simply helps others to see the world in a new way. I have two stories. There's an American poet named Naomi Shihab Nye, and she was once on a bus in Central America that was attacked by robbers, and someone was killed, but she was able to walk away from the scene, and a family that lived farther down the road took her in. And in her poetry, she writes of her sorrow and her vulnerability, and then she ends with this. She wrote, then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore, only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread, only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. I wonder if the family ever heard the poem that they inspired. We may feel that kindness is fleeting or insignificant because we often don't see the results. But what if it's how we show God to one another in small and large ways? When Naomi found it with strangers after a traumatic experience, it clung to her and it sustained her. A friend I respect very much went to India and was instantly overwhelmed by all the poverty. And he spoke to a man working at a feeding station and he asked, "How do you do this day in and day out? I couldn't bear it." And the worker said, "I just focus on the next person in line." Giving kindness to the person in front of him sustained this man to face the enormous suffering that he encountered every day. So in Romans today, Paul gives some very specific instructions on how to live our lives as a vehicle for grace all the time. You may know that Eugene Peterson wrote a free-form translation of the New Testament that's easier for us to hear. It's called The Message. So allow me a few verses of this contemporary Paul in his letter from today. It's very clear. Bless your enemies. No cursing under your breath. Laugh with your happy friends when they're happy. Share tears when they're down. Get along with each other. Don't be stuck up. Make friends with nobodies. Don't be the great somebody. Don't hit back. Discover beauty in everyone. And if you've got it in you, get along with everybody. Don't insist on getting even. That's not for you to do. I'll do the judging, says God. I'll take care of it. Once upon a time, on my own bulletin board, I had a sign tacked up that read, "Justice is getting what you deserve. Mercy is not getting what you deserve. And grace is getting what you don't deserve." So let's face it, we're all on this journey together, and we've all been undeserving. So we're not in any position to judge. But we are in a position to strive for what Paul describes, so that through us, others can see life in a new way, that is God's way. Now, with the pandemic and leadership changes at St. Bart's, this church has been through a lot in a very, very short time. And as we're finding our way back into church and back out into the world as a blessing, I simply pray that we remember that we are kind. We will join the larger efforts against poverty and injustice where results are important. We will have a stewardship campaign where results are important. But at the individual level, it's not about results. It's just non-judgmental caring. May we remain humble, knowing that it's God who turns our offerings into results, although we may never know what they are. So if St. Bart's had a reminder sign that we were to pass by every day, here's what I suggest it should say. Our job is kindness. Our call is to whomever or whatever God puts in front of us. And our faith is that God will take our offerings like seeds and grow them for God's kingdom. Anything else is a stumbling block. It's not our job to sort or judge or draw lines. The gospel tells us that's Jesus' job. He handles the repayment plan. Knowing that's not our burden, we're free to be all those things that Paul directs us to be. And his list is long and specific, but in a nutshell, it is to be kind. Amen.